I'm Brian, 35. I work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I earn just enough to scrap by, just enough to provide my son with what he needs.
Appropriate.
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 Pronounce it by yourself.
Appropriate.
It's not appropriate, it's appropriate.
Appropriate.
Again?
Appropriate.
How can you not know? You just said it yourself. Appropriate. Appropriate. How many times do I have to repeat? It's appropriate. 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 Are you even listening? Are you focusing? Do you understand? It's appropriate. I cannot stand this anymore.
What else can I do? Another day, another complaint, another beating. Nothing changes. Maybe it's just stupid.
Sir, your son hasn't completed his homework again. He hardly focuses, he can barely read, and he can't write properly. At the rate he's going, he's lucky if he even makes it out of here. How many times do I have to repeat myself, Brian? Over and over again, I keep telling you about mistakes and you don't try to rectify it. Why don't you listen to me, Brian? Do you even understand what I'm saying or not? Brian, why don't you answer me when I talk to you?
My name is Joe and I don't like to go to school. No matter how hard I try, I will never do well.
Okay class, today I'm going to tell you the story of King Midas. King Midas was a rich king. He loved gold more than anything else in the world. One day,
I
while
struggle
he was
to
counting
keep
his
up in
gold
class.
coins, a fairy suddenly
I'd rather not
appeared
be
before
here.
him. King Midas, I'm here to give you a wish.
What are you going to do for your holiday? I'm going to watch a football match tonight. You?
Sometimes I find it hard to find my way home, but no one understands. It's always like this. It's never good enough. This kind of stuff doesn't happen to anyone else. Maybe I'm just stupid.
Hey, I brought home some snack for you. Do you want to eat them now? Hey, why are you crying, huh? There's no need to cry. I'm sorry I've been scolding you so much lately. I know it's hard, but we gotta try. You don't give up too, okay? We'll both try our best.
Sometimes, I want so badly to tell him things will get better. But I can't, because I don't know if they will.
I think you saw the frustration of the parent. I mean, it's so frustrating. And this is a topic that we're going to deal with this evening. And to do that for us is Mrs. Florence Akua Mensah. A little background of Auntie. She is a senior lecturer in the Department of Special Education, University of Education Winneba. She's a mother of 4, a board member of the Education and Outreach Program. She's a manager of campaign for Learning Disabilities and Differences, that's CLED, Ghana. It's a non-governmental organization. She's an assessment clinician and interventionist for individuals with reading difficulties, learning difficulties, and intellectual disabilities. She co-authored books on specific learning disabilities, and she's a member of several international associations and learned bodies like the International Literacy Association, ILA, and she facilitates workshops for teachers, parents, and other stakeholders on diagnostic teaching techniques for diverse learners. Her hobbies are researching, singing, and sightseeing. This is just a brief background of the lady who is going to do justice to the topic on learning disabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, let's welcome Mrs. Florence Akua Mensah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great opportunity to come and fraternize with wonderful people like you. I had the opportunity to watch some of your videos and realized this was a wonderful family one needed to be with. And I also realized that you had your sessions quarterly. So I told myself I would love to be part of this family and will try as much as possible to be part of your quarterly meetings, because I bet you the teachings you have here, money cannot buy. Money cannot buy. And they are the first of its kind in the entire nation, if you care to know. Yes, they are the first of its kind. So I was wondering, why have you kept this to yourself? Why wouldn't you make this thing bigger for a larger population to enjoy? We have met here as a family to talk about our children with learning disabilities. Currently, you would have heard that they are termed children with learning differences. People are of the view that the disability tags them, and so they feel they should be termed children with learning differences. And then you would hear vividly from the story MC said about her child, that yes, she went to tell the school she is learning differently and you didn't know how to take care of her. And so it is not an issue of disability. So to start this all together, I would want us to have a feel of what it takes expecting your child whilst you are pregnant. So we move on, and then this is going to be done in the following strands. Being a teacher, I have tried to organize my write-up as if it was for a conference. And so this means it's going to be available for anyone that wants to have, so that you can make use of it later on. So we are going to be looking at a brief introduction, and then that introduction has to do with parental reactions to their children with learning differences or learning difficulties. And then we will try to look at certain conditions that are misdiagnosed for learning disabilities. People see children with, for instance, Fragile X, and then they conclude that it's a learning disability. So we will try to have an idea of a few of them. Then we would look at what exactly learning disabilities are in terms of a definition, and then what causes learning disabilities, types of them, how do we assess and how do we identify that our children have learning disabilities. I have grown to make parents aware that they are the first teachers of their children. For all you know, you gave birth to your child, so that child belongs to you biologically, and that makes you the very first teacher. When you put your breast into the mouth of your child and was helping him or her to suck, you were teaching. And then if the child speaks a language that is vulgar or not appropriate, and you said, no, say it this way, remember, you were teaching. But that way of teaching, we think it's not formalized. And we think it is the teacher that is the best person to teach our kids. But for your information, children even learn better informally than in the structured programs. Because for the structured programs, they feel they are forced into them, and they will prefer to learn informally. So we will look at some characteristics, and for that, I try to come along with a checklist. I have 10 copies here, and it is for you. So if some people are not able to grab copies, you could make photocopies later on. And then that checklist is, yes, for you, a parent, a teacher, a proprietor. And then you could have this on you, and you will track the development and the growth of your child in terms of learning disabilities. So any of the symptoms you find, then that would have risen a red flag, and you begin to think through that what exactly is happening to my child. And so if we are talking about the characteristics and how they are identified, then appropriately we will have to look at how do we manage them. Because how do we teach them, even as parents or as teachers? And then for all you know, whether you like it or not, being in Ghana, Ghana has signed onto this policy known as inclusion. I think we have heard. And whether we like it or not, we are part of inclusion. Because very soon, I think latest by next academic year, it should have been this September, until the double track thing came and took over it. So next academic year, we would be implementing a policy known as the Inclusive Education Policy. And inclusive education means that educating children with all levels, whether visually impaired, hearing impaired, learning disabled, gifted, talented, dull, smart, weak, beautiful, ugly, tall, whatever, educating all of them in the same classroom. We are no more going to send children with difficulties to anywhere. We are all going to be practicing inclusive education. And so Ghana joined this in 1992 in Salamanca, where there was a conference. And then Ghana has been practicing inclusive education on pilot basis for more than 10 years now, under various models. There are about 6 models. And now Ghana is ready because the policy has been rolled on board. So if you Google Inclusive Education Policy of Ghana, this is what you find. I printed this 30 minutes before I started. And so I'm going to leave this here for you. So if you cannot get onto the Google, then you could arrange and find a way of making a photocopy. The inclusive education policy is in 3 folds. So this is the policy document itself, and then this is the implementation guideline. So how to implement the policy. And then these are the standards. So this is how you would measure whether you are being able to practice the inclusive policy appropriately or not. Lucky you to have this by now, because then some private schools are trying this, and it is making them get external funding for their schools because they have been able to say they are doing some kind of inclusion. So if you are a proprietress here and you are interested, or you are a teacher and you are interested, you can link up and then we will let you know how to go about it. And there you would qualify for some incentives and support because you are practicing inclusion in your school. Then we will look at some support systems available. Yes, there are places you can send your children with learning disabilities to if the checklist does not help you. You think it's beyond your control and you are not able to travel outside, as our sister did. There are places in Ghana you could send a child to for support. So right away, we will start with the introduction, and this is what I have to say about the introduction. Some individuals, despite being average, I'm not going to be tied in here. I feel entangled. I'm free to move out, right? So some individuals, despite being entangled or being gifted, talented, or being smart, have issues with how they learn. For your information, children with learning disabilities sometimes can be intelligent and can be very, very smart in physique, but have an intrinsic hidden disability. Take note, learning disabilities are intrinsic. They are hidden within us. And so you cannot see, but they are just manifested extrinsically and in specific learning areas like mathematics, like reading, like writing, like perceptual problems, etc. So these skills include those needed for successful reading. And then for that, we would want to look at what exactly the term learning disabilities are. I am of the view that people are waiting. What is it? How do we get to know? Learning disability is a heterogeneous, meaning a group of issues that is occurring in the central nervous system. That is the brain and the spinal cord. The link between the brain and the spinal cord of a child. So it is something you don't have command over, and which means learning disabilities, when they are found on you, live with you till you die. But there is hope. Hope being that when the condition is identified early, then early identification sets in now, right? So you'll be able to arrest the situation, and then you would have tried to take care of that child to a better limit than maybe foregoing and making it compound. So learning disabilities, as we have here, happens to an individual, and it is hidden. That is what I am calling intrinsic. And it is therefore a condition that will affect the child's achievement in school substantially. If we say substantially, I am a teacher, so I'm going to do a lot of clarifications here. Substantial means it is calling eyebrows. It is calling attention. You cannot just watch that child. Are you getting it? You are alarmed, which means once a while, you and I can go off track. So for me, a special educator, we don't say there are normal human beings. None of us here is normal. Yes, I could just cause something and you will marvel that somebody will laugh now and triple off, fall on the carpet, lift their leg and be laughing. And that is weird, looking at a conference setup. At that time, you just became abnormal. Yes, you became abnormal. And the setting we have here will not allow you to even laugh using a certain volume, even if the thing is causing laughter. The moment you do that, you just became abnormal. Meanwhile, you are properly dressed and you think, I am normal. So we say normal in quotes to mean there is no normal human being. At a point in time, any of us can get off track. And then, so for us, we say that these children have issues learning, and it is substantial. It is huge enough. It is calling eyebrows. So we move on to the next slide, which I am happy our sister, the MC, did justice to for me, parental reactions. Naturally, we all as parents, proprietors, teachers, would want our children that we teach or that we give birth to have been good looking, especially when we give birth to the child fresh. We expect a bouncy baby boy and a bouncy baby girl, to the extent that people now even take pills whilst they are pregnant just to give birth to a fair child, a big child, forgetting that if the child is big, you could even undergo surgery. All they want is when people come to that room that day, they should say the child is big, oh, the child is fair, the child is beautiful. And then there you are, you give birth to your child, expecting that the child should bear all these qualities, and then the child begins to go to school, as she said, and then learn and become that lawyer. Everybody wants the child to be the lawyer, the engineer, the pilot, the whatever. Even the teacher, they say, no, senior lecturer. Meanwhile, a lecturer is a teacher. It is just that the level you are teaching is different. So I usually would have said, I am a teacher. And people will look at me twice. And I say, no, I'm teaching, but at a particular level. So we assume and we want big things for our children, only to realize that the kids are not who we want to become, or they are not growing to become what we want them to be. Now something comes into our life known as the grieving process. Every one of us here grieves. Each and every one of us here goes through what is known as the grieving process. Whether the child was normal in quotes or had a disability, you grieve. And these are the processes. The grieving processes are 5. It begins with denial. So you begin to say, no, it's not my child. I don't think I gave birth to this child. Sometimes you look at the child and you say, how you are behaving. In our family, we are not like that. It is from the father's family. Then sometimes when the woman is somewhere else, the man looks at her and says, undertone, are you getting it? We begin to deny that this is not my child. This cannot be my child. And unfortunately, when there are siblings and some perform better than that child, it becomes worse. They begin to insult that person. They begin to compare and say, your younger sister is doing well. Why are you doing this? Why are we doing that? So we begin to deny, and we want to get close to the better child. And the one that is not performing, we always try to shun. And then through the denial, we move into the second stage, which is anger. After we have denied ourselves or the child, we begin to get angry that, is this mine? The accounts will say, Misha Brainy, is this my destiny? Hey, who has done this to me? Hey, my enemies have gotten me. I'm in trouble. We begin to get angry at everything. Are you getting? Looking for who did this to me. And these things, for your information, happen mostly to the male children. Yes. History has shown that the survival rate of boys is very, very high. For a boy to survive, are you getting it? Through the developmental stages, even through the conception and be delivered and survive, through to become a man, normal in quotes, the survival rate is very, very high, meaning we lose a lot of the boys. It's one of the reasons why the women are more. Are you getting it? The survival, even forming boys through conception, the process is more difficult than girls. Yeah, if you need boys, the men will have to be storing things, eating some ways. You will have to be denying the amount of times you are having sex and the others, if you really are targeting to be able. But for girls, spread and then they come. Are you getting it? This all goes in to tell that there are several ways that we are able to have gotten boys intact. Are you getting it? And for that matter, the ability to survive through life is also difficult, very, very, and very complicated. So anger comes in, and then when anger comes in, we want to take a step. So we begin to bargain, and then we are shopping from this sopho to this pastor, to this malam, to this preacher. The moment we hear this pastor has come, we rush with our child. My child cannot do this, help me. My child is not reading. My child is not learning. My child is not coping in class. My child is just stupid. So we begin to shop with the children. Now, I can feel some of us, the stages we have gone through so far, or where we have reached. From our demeanor, I can feel. So we tend to be doing shopping, bargaining. And for now, the pastors will even say, you bring 50 Ghana. And some will say, oh, please reduce it for me a little. You can imagine. And then they say, you don't worry, bring 30. We are bargaining and shopping with our children. And then we move into depression. I told you a while ago that learning disabilities come to stay. So after you did all the anger and all the bargaining and the shopping, the condition still is there because you have not seen a specialist. And then you will now move into depression. You will get frustrated, and then you will not know what to do. And then we move on to the acceptance stage. My prayer is each and every one of us here, if we find ourselves in such conditions where we don't understand our kids, their learning styles, my prayer is we are able to reach the acceptance stage. The acceptance stage is that stage where we accept that, oh, Papa Kwesi cannot read. Like what she did. She realized that, no, my child just cannot read and write. But you people, can't you see she cannot read and write? That is why she's not able to cope with the other subjects. And then she had to look for solution to help the child. My prayer is we all are able to accept that, yes, my child has a problem. And until we do that, we will keep shopping. We will keep angry. Sometimes people reach stage 2 of the process and then they are comfortable. So it is not compulsory that you go through the 5 stages. Some are at stage 1 and then they are lucky to accept. Some reach stage 2 and then they realize that, let me accept my child has a problem. But some go through all the 5 so they are able to reach there. So let's say that we have all, whether as teachers, as parents, as proprietors, we have been able to accept that the kids we are handling have learning differences. And so if that is it, let us look at certain conditions that perhaps may be misdiagnosed as learning disabilities. Sometimes people would have sent their kids to the assessment centers or to the hospitals, and then they are told that your child has autistic spectrum disorder. Everybody is calling everything autism here in Ghana now. Everything is autism. Meanwhile, the conditions are different, and then they manifest differently. So for autism, autism is a child exhibiting extreme isolation. That is the basic identification of an autistic child. So in that classroom, by the second you go to bring him or her in front, before you realize, he moves. And then when he moves to a corner where nobody is, will always want to be in that corner. You will go to bring her and then continue teaching. Before you realize, she's back there. Yes, that is autism. Extreme isolation, which means once a while, you and I would want some kind of break, some isolation. But this particular isolation is extreme. It's beyond the normal. And so the sign is the child is showing signs of autism. And then that is different from learning disabilities. And then someone can also say Asperger's syndrome is learning disabilities. Asperger's syndrome has to do with, it's a neurological problem, which is coming from the brain. And then these ones, Asperger's syndrome, Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, I would advise that you see either a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist who would do a sociometric assessment on the child and would have been able to tell that maybe the brain has not developed fully, or there is something wrong with a portion of the brain. And so the reading center of the brain has been affected. So this is what we can do to the child. And these services are available in Ghana. They are. It's just that we don't actually know where to go to. By the time we are done speaking here or chatting, we would have known exactly what to do when we smell these traces on our children. And then I would want you to know that when we say cerebral palsy, cerebral has to do with movement, and palsy is movement that is affected through the brain. So cerebral palsy people are those that would have been walking in this way, finding it difficult to hold themselves, but their brain and the capacity of the brain and its development is intact. But sometimes we see them and we misdiagnose them and think they cannot learn. And so we say they have learning difficulties. But cerebral palsy people can function perfectly in academia. In fact, I have one in my level 200 class. And then in level 100, he did 7 courses and had 5 A's in the 7 courses. And in level 200, we did a quiz a month ago. The sum total is 24. He got the highest, 23. The cerebral palsied one. Whilst we had normal in quote people. That alone tells that cerebral palsy has nothing to do with the capacity of the brain. It's just the brain area that affects movement that has been affected. And so the child can function properly if care is taken. And then attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, famous ADHD, is common with us all. Hyperactivity is overactive. So those children that are overactive, inattentive, cannot sit at one place. These are the category we are talking about. And surely in the classroom, if the child cannot sit at one place, then the child will not be able to learn. And so people are tempted to say that learning disability is ADHD. Meanwhile, it's a different condition altogether. Then Fragile X is also coming from it's a chromosomal abnormality. When the child was forming, and then there were some chromosomal defects, and then the portion of the brain didn't develop properly. That could result in that. So we have the Tourette syndrome, and then we have the aphasia. Aphasia is closely linked to inability to read. Aphasic children cannot read at all. No matter what you are doing to them, they have a difficulty reading. But we will find out exactly why they are not able to read. So on that note, we already spoke about learning disabilities, but as an academia, this is the style I went. But basically, I think we spoke about the fact that it was an intrinsic disorder and it was presumed to be as a result of the central nervous system dysfunction. If we say presumed, then it means that there is no actual cause for learning disabilities, but there are assumptions that there is a problem with the central nervous system, and for that matter, the child is unable to learn. It's a presumption, but there are suspected causes that we will talk about later on in this presentation. So we now look at some other factors that you are still tempted to think cause learning disabilities. The first one is intellectual disabilities. Intellectual disabilities are conditions that we formerly would have called mental retardation. You remember mental retardation? Those that in our local languages we could have said Jimmy, Jimmy, Bulu, and the rest. The Englishman would say intellectual disability. The child has a problem with the intellect, the performance of the brain. But for intellectual disabilities, it is a total sub-average performance of the brain. So that child cannot do well in the maths English, science, like the entire subject area. And it is because the brain is performing at a sub-average level. That is different from learning disabilities. I hope you remember. With learning disabilities, the brain is intact. It is just a specific problem the child is facing, like can read but cannot do summary, can pronounce the name but cannot write it, can write the first, the second, and the last letter of his name, but will always forget the second letter. Those ones are the learning disabilities. Can do mathematics very well, but the moment you said you should do multiplication, it's just showing signs of fever, wants to like chill and die. The moment you mention multiplication, then you say, but it is just reducing this to this, but you were able to add, you get confused. Those ones are the learning disabilities. But intellectual disability is emanating from mental retardation, which is a sub-average intellectual functioning. And then another one is emotional disturbances. And then for that, I would want to derive the cause from our homes. Our children, as parents, our children pick a lot of hope, assurance from us. And then when we are fighting, for instance, when we are deserting them, when their homes are broken, when we try not to be there for the child. Being there for the child is like always ready to listen to what the child wants to say. But we have parents who are there physically, but they are not there for their children, meaning they don't have listening ears for their children. In such situations, the children become emotionally imbalanced. And if a child is emotionally imbalanced, definitely there are going to be difficulties. But we are saying that that kind of difficulty will not cause learning disability. Let's still move on. Then we have visual or hearing impairment. Yes, I am in a department of special education, which means that persons even with visual loss or hearing loss have been able to find themselves in the university and even are getting first class. So if the visually impaired is in the university, that alone tells that cannot cause learning disability. Yes. Otherwise, then how did he learn? How did she pass through the system and is here? And how did she get a first class? How? So visual impairment and hearing impairment are not the causative factors of learning disabilities. But somebody can be learning disabled and at the same time visually impaired, which is a multiple condition. I hope that is clear. Somebody can be hearing impaired and in addition, learning disabled. That makes it a multiple disability. But it is not a hearing impairment that is causing the learning disability. No, they are two separate things that are moving on their own. And then the last one we have there is environmental or cultural disadvantages. Yes, some of us. I remember when I was schooling, in a day school, and my parents couldn't afford some of my textbooks, and then I had to be reading from my friends. I remember sometimes the condition was that you will have to read overnight and bring my economics book to me the next morning. And then what I usually would do is, I will fetch water in a bucket. Yes, I've practiced that before. And then overnight, sit and put my legs in the water because the owner of the book is going to take it the next morning. Are you getting it? Those were environmental deprivations, disadvantages in the environment. Culturally, I was a female and my mother used to sell and I needed to help her sell. So the men or the boys in the home had the privilege to have been learning, but I would have had to help sell, to help cook, to help pack and everything. And always I remembered I was ready to be able to read after 10 p.m. Meanwhile, I was a day student and by 4:35, I should be ready to go to school. That was a cultural disadvantage because I was a female. But the boys didn't go through that. They would go and play, and come late, come and eat, leave the dishes, and I'll wash them. But we are saying that, yes, if that was a cause of learning disability, I wouldn't have been able to become a lecturer. That should have stopped me, or that should have made learning difficult for me, and I wouldn't have been able to climb the ladder. But that is not. So with that, then if those factors are not causing learning disabilities, what are the causes of learning disabilities at all? And so we have them here as hereditary factors, and then accidents after birth, external factors, pregnancy and childbirth problems, etc. So we have them here as 4. I'll begin with the first one. You remember we said we are not too sure of what causes learning disabilities, but we are suspecting that, I need the diagram back just for him. Okay, we are suspecting that pregnancy and childbirth can cause it. So if pregnancy and childbirth can cause it, then let's go this way. I am pregnant now, and then once a while I feel nausea. It's the first 3 months. I'm in the first 3 months, so I feel like taking a little alcohol once a while. I feel like chewing this thing once a while. I feel like taking this concoction. They say when I take it, I'll not vomit. But the accompaniment of the concoction, I don't have an idea. And a growing fetus in the first 3 months is as fragile as you can imagine. And remember, the brain is developing. And the brain is the most important organ at that moment through the developmental stage. And there you are, drinking, smoking, doing all sorts of things, all in the name of nausea. Some, all in the name of my child will be the strongest amongst other children when I deliver them. And so issues like that could affect the developing brain. And the moment the developing brain is tempered with around that stage, then there could be issues of learning disabilities, issues of visual impairment, issues of mental retardation, issues of hearing impairment, etc. Or sometimes multiple disabilities. Because yes, in my department we have a deaf blind girl who is in level 200. She's deaf, meaning cannot hear, and she's blind. She cannot see. That is Sylvia. But she has done a first year and is doing a second year. She passed all her courses in level 100 and has qualified into level 200. And so life goes on for her. So it is either hereditary, and that is sometimes, and I have an interesting story to share. There is this family member that the father used not to be good in mathematics when he was growing as a boy, but now he has a lot of money and can buy all the books in the world and expects the son to become an engineer, according to him. So there used to be friction in the home that the mom thinks, can we have a little time for this boy to grow properly? And the father says, no, he is my heir apparent. Like I want him, it's a boy, he must be there for me. He is coming to own my treasury, my house, my building, my company. And so he must be up to tax. So this battle was in the home, and then getting even close to divorce. And some of us had to go in. When I went in, with my knowledge as a special educator, I had to do some interviews separately. When I interviewed the father, I realized that he was mathematically weak when he was growing as a boy. And then when he got to that part of the interview and said, madam, that is what is happening to your boy. So, but me realize you have not realized it. And I say, yes. Have you heard of hereditary? It is your gene, yours and that of your wife, that made up the boy. And so maybe the higher version of yours in terms of mathematical deviance is what the child picked. And that is what he's depicting. And look at the mess you are causing. And then I told him, so what are you going to do now? I would want you to apologize and tell who you were to your wife. That is what will bring peace home. Because after that, we will sit and strategize to be able to help this boy. He declined. But I was able to lure him to understand that it was necessary. So we had a case conference. And then there, people told their stories. And the man came out to say he was sorry because he remembered he never passed mathematics in the basic school when he was growing. And he has now gotten to know that maybe that is what the son had picked. So we made amends, and we rather looked for the strength of the boy. We drew a strength and weakness chart, and we got the strength of the boy and decided as a team to help the boy achieve his strengths. And luckily for us, the strengths were even in the arts and humanities, which will so help him to become something like a boss sort of, and could fit in the managerial position the father wanted, but maybe couldn't do engineering because engineering had to do with calculations. And so they agreed. And then there the boy goes, he's comfortable, the family is free now, and life goes on. Sometimes we also have accidents during, before, and after birth. Sometimes when we are pregnant, and then we mistakenly slip. Let's say accident in the kitchen, the ladies. You slipped, and you know, the child lies at a place that he or she feels comfortable in the womb. So let's assume the head of the child at that juncture was here, and then you slipped and fell, and that portion landed on the floor. Can you continue the story? What will happen? A developing fetus may be affected, and nobody knows the part of the head that really had the impact. And let's assume it is the brain. So there you are, there is a problem. And then during delivery too, sometimes mistakenly, the nurses are not able to help through the delivery process well. Some of the children slip off their hand and fall. Some slip, they slip always and just fall. And for the state in which you are as a mother, you wouldn't have known what have happened to your child, the pick. Sometimes so when there is delayed delivery, and then the nurses will have to help using forceps to help you bring the child out. Because the moment it is delayed, the brain could not have access to enough oxygen. And the moment there is lack of oxygen, nausea sets in, and nausea affects the brain. And there you are, all sorts of things will begin to happen to that child. So nobody can really tell which one is affecting that child. But these are certain factors we presume to have been the causes of learning disabilities. Then external factors like teachers frowning at children who are not learning well, insulting them, panking them, spanking them, and sometimes even cursing them. I remember my friend teacher once told me, as stupid as I was, even when the final exam questions were soaked, he said when they bring the final question, they soak it in water, and they bisect my head into my skull into two, and pour the soaked answers into my head and stitch back. I will still not get it right. That's what he told me, nobody but me. And asked me, what did I do to warrant that? He said I came to his class late. That was all. And asked me, was it my fault to have come late? I needed to sell for my mother before coming. What did I do wrong? Where did I go wrong? But I was cold to that effect. And then I told myself, wow, I didn't know I was that stupid. Even when the answers are there, I would not make it. So I just told myself, I'm going to prove to this man that I wasn't that stupid. I will specifically, painstakingly learn the French very well and make sure I pass. So that I did, and I passed the French. Yes, when the results came, he was in charge. I went there, we were in a queue. When it was about to reach my turn, he left the room. And so somebody gave mine to me and then he came back. You can imagine what teachers can do to their learners. And so when you do this to the learner gets frustrated and surely will not be able to learn properly. And then when the class sizes are large, you know, now we are complaining. 100 people in a class, 80 people in a class, 70 people in a class. How? Me alone, I alone. How am I able to teach all of them and attend to those who have difficulties? I cannot do that. Yes, we agree that you cannot do that. That is why inclusion has come. Inclusion is educating all these categories together. But you're not going to do that alone, okay? You are going to be supported by a resource teacher. So the Department of Special Education in every year at least graduates over 100 students as resource teachers into the country. And they are scattered all over the country. But maybe it's because you don't know they are. So you are not able to make proper use of them. They are in the district offices. They are zoned and in charge of some clusters of school. So what I will advise you do if you are confused with a child that is not coping or learning properly in your class is you first of all go to the district education office, whether it is a private school or public, and then you look for the one in charge of disabilities. There is a desk, there is an officer in charge. And then you ask that officer, this is where I am. This is my school. Who is the resource teacher assigned to that zone? And then you will be introduced to that person. And it is their responsibility, because the Ministry of Education came into an agreement with the department to produce this number of resource persons so that the practice of inclusion can be manifested successfully. So they are available for you to be able to help you. So such external factors as those ones we have mentioned can be the cause of learning disabilities. Now we will look at the types of learning disabilities, and then we want to look at them as non-academic, then academic. And I love the academic so much because that is what bothers us most. So we have non-academic, and under that we have visual motor problems, language problems, and then we have perceptual problems, and then we move on to the academics, where we have dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. And then they are simple to get. Dyslexia is the difficulties in reading. So children who have difficulties in reading, that condition technically is called dyslexia. And then dysgraphia is from the word graphic. So those who have difficulties writing. And then writing broad, those who are mixing the uppercase with the lowercase, those who are not writing on the same line, they start from Abidjan, and by the time the sentence ends, they are in Toronto. Mixing up the things, are you getting it? Those who are writing the first letter in an uppercase, and the next time they are ending the sentence rather, and then in a lowercase or that, they don't understand that at the end of a sentence there must be a full stop. No matter how you correct her, she does not understand. Those people are the ones we are talking of. And then dyscalculia is from the word calculation. So those children that have difficulties with mathematics, those who have issues with calculations. I'm not talking about the math phobias. There are some of us who are, a phobia is like fear, who are afraid of math. So it is not the math phobias. These ones, they are there. They are not afraid of the math, but they just have issues doing them. You are asking a question and then she's saying, say. The moment you say, okay, so what is the answer? And then they are carrying themselves some ways, or they just keep quiet, and you wonder, but you raise your hand. I didn't call you. Those conditions are dyscalculia. And then so we move from this to the next slide. That will introduce us to this beautiful tree. And there we have the specific learning disabilities, and I have mentioned them already. It is just displayed on these trees. So we pick them one after another. And It begins with fine. It begins with dyslexia. And then there is a classroom setting. After this, we will do a group task. So please let us pay attention. We need the characteristics here to be able to answer the questions properly. So there we are. We have dyslexia. Josephine, right up is not projected. So there we are. We have dyslexia. And as I explained, dyslexia is the inability of the child to be able to read. And then the reading can be in the form of cannot spell his name, cannot write his name, cannot write the letters of the alphabet, cannot write January to December. We'll say January, February, and say November, March, mixing them here and there. We'll say Monday. You want him to say Tuesday, and then she will say February. And you are wondering, you look at her and you wonder what exactly is wrong with this child. So dyslexia in that classroom setting affects children that have issues with reading. And the issues in reading are categorized with even how fluent they speak or how they can understand you. Sometimes you do a comprehension task. You tell a beautiful story, and then you ask the child to tell you back what he or she understood from the story. And they look at you as if you wasted your energy. And sometimes it's like, do you want to say none of you heard me? You want to spank them. You are so confused and angry. Sometimes it is not their fault, because literature has proven that in every normal classroom setting, we have about 80% of the learners there who have learning disabilities. Yes. This is why you worry. This is why you are so confused as to my learners are not learning. In the classroom setting, if there are 40 students, 80% of them have learning disabilities. And so if you have problems teaching them to cope and understand you, you now know that, oh, in this class, almost all of them have learning disabilities. That is why I'm struggling. But now it behoves on you to find out which disability is manifesting. Is it reading problem? Is it writing? Is it mathematics? Is it perception? Is it visual processing? That is where the problem is. But I have brought you a checklist. So at least the checklist could guide you to tell that, this particular one is dyslexia. And then you would have found ways of helping. So dysgraphia, as I said earlier on, has to do with problems with writing. And that is where they write anyhow. They start from this angle and then they end somewhere else. So there you are, a picture of a child who has written a paragraph. If I attempt to read that, I think I will have a headache that will take me months to cure, so I will not. But this is what he really wanted to write. The problem is in the way the mind interprets what the eyes see. I have written it properly here, and that is what the child is writing like that. As if they are dancing. They always see the letters as dancing. So sometimes even when they are writing them, they want to write them slanting to show that the letters are dancing. And then you would have been beating them. And so we already spoke about dyscalculia, which has to do with problems with calculations. And then dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is a disorder that is characterized by difficulties in muscle control. So those children that have problems grasping pencils, some end up holding the pen like this. Excuse me. Some even like this. Some like this. And then they are writing. You would have been knocking him, pushing him. It's not his fault. There is a problem with muscle control. So you will need to teach that child even how to grasp a pen or a pencil. Yes, and for that, I have written a book on teaching the child how to grasp pencil and then all the problems in writing. There you are. It was published this year, and then we have produced about 300 copies so there you are. Writing instruction for young learners, a manual for parents, teachers, and curriculum planners. Those who even write from left to right, and then you'll be beating them. In the book, you would learn to know that there is nothing wrong with a child writing with the left hand. But we have rather written how to help the child who is left-handed to also be able to write. But you do not attempt to change the left-handedness into right. Please don't. Because for those who are left-handed, they are even very brilliant. Very, very. So the moment you are changing, you are confusing them. And this one is also helping struggling readers to read. Yes. It is a manual, so it tells one after the other what you can do to help the children. Then the next one that is hidden, that is so confusing, is the auditory processing disorder, APD. And as for APD, it's so serious because its manifestation is complicated in that what a child hears is what he's producing. When you watch the video, did you hear what the father was saying? Appropriate. And the child was saying appropriate. The father would say, I said appropriate. And the child would say appropriate. And then he started scolding him. It's not his fault. Auditory. Auditory is like hearing. Audit. AUDITORY. Auditory processing. For the child, he heard appropriate. And that is what he is saying. And you are knocking him, beating him. Sometimes we even saw their parents at home. Can you imagine? The child is not performing in the class, and we are insulting the parents back at home who have done nothing to us. But for all you know, the child is not hearing what you are saying properly. And so what he heard, or she heard, is what he is saying. And then the next one is visual processing disorder. For visual processing disorder too, it talks about what the child sees. And so there you are. The moment I took this off, I saw people as almost double. Some of us are fairer. Are you getting it? So somebody intentionally took this from me and said, oh, come and pick this lady. Before you realize I'm picking her. And then you are knocking the child. You are backsliding, backslashing, insulting here and there. Have you taken the pains to find out how well that child can see? And whether the child even has a low vision? Because for low vision, it is the mildest form of vision loss. There is no sign on the eye, but the eye is seen like a tunnel, like in a tunnel vision. So thin. Everything else around is not seen. The small one in the hole is what the eye is capturing. And so that is what they are seeing. And you are knocking. Can't you see there is V on the line? Can't you see? Can't you see there is O? We are knocking, beating them here and there. So what the child sees is what he is writing back for you. How do we assess or how do we identify them? In Ghana, we have several assessment centers for diagnosing and prescribing how we should cater for individuals or children with disabilities. The famous one in Accra here is the Achimota Assessment Center. Yes, there is an assessment center at Achimota, and then when you get there, they have a team of experts. The team comprises of a clinical psychologist, of a psychiatrist, of counselors, of hearing impaired experts, and then visual impaired experts. Visual impaired experts not meaning the individual, but the person is an expert in visual impairment. So whatever it is a problem with a child, with you who are in Accra, I will advise you send them to the Achimota Assessment Center. It's very close to Achimota School, primary school, very close. That is how I always tell people, and they get there and don't get lost. So they are able to conduct assessment on the child, and then they will tell specifically what is wrong with the child and direct you how to help the child. Also, there are resource teachers I have already mentioned in your neighborhood that you didn't even know. So it is your responsibility as a teacher, a parent, a proprietor, to look out for which resource teacher or which resource settlement is available in your neighborhood. And you can do so by first visiting the district offices of education, and then you look for the disability desk or the coordinator for special needs education, and then you will confront that person and ask of how do you get in touch with the resource person within your neighborhood of school. And then it is that person's job. They are paid as us teachers monthly. It is that person's job to screen the child and advise you, and sometimes even pay visits or follow-ups to see whether what he has said about the child is also working out. We also have the RTIs. The RTIs are more foreign. And usually, I'm not comfortable with the foreign staffs because sometimes they are culturally friendly. So that is why I even mentioned that of Ghana before going to the foreign one. I prefer what we have and making it better than taking what we don't have command. Otherwise, there are RTIs, and they are response assessment techniques that you could also send the kids to psychiatrists, and they could conduct on the learners or on the children, and will be able to tell you exactly what is wrong and which area of the brain is affected, so that you can be able to help the children through. Since I'm going to give the checklist out, I would skip the characteristics because it is the same thing on the checklist, and you're going to have them. So I'm skipping the characteristics, and I'm going straight to how do we manage? How do we teach these children? I have here that we should expose the children to oral reading. So it is not appropriate we do silent reading with them. So we, the teachers who sometimes hide under the cover of maybe being lazy, and then we want to rest a little. It's a tiring day. Me, I've not eaten anything. Everybody pick your reading book, read silently, and then you are sort of resting, all in the name of silent reading. We are saying that that's not going to help the child, because if the child has dyslexia, which is reading difficulty, then that child would have been expecting that you read out, oral, loud, for that child to be able to mimic or to be able to sort of try to hear what you said and attempt to say the same thing. So do oral reading, writing, drawing, encourage the child, make the child know that you can do it, appreciate the strength of the child, and then encourage the child through his or her weaknesses. And then you can also do a multi-sensory structured language instruction. Usually, I remember when I go on supervision to look at my students' work, the first question I usually would ask, how have you holistically touched this learner? And if I say holistically, I am looking at, some children do very well with touching in terms of reading or learning. So what provision did you make in terms of touching? What provision did you make in terms of visualizing? Some are visual learners. What provision did you make in terms of, let's say, manipulation, kinesthetic learners? They will want to manipulate, in fact, break the thing down into bits. What provisions did you make for those children? And we usually are of the view that there is a curriculum that I must complete, especially with us in most of the private schools, where there is keen competition, where there are league tables, where my school should be on top. So that, are you getting it? And then what we are doing is following the curriculum strictly, and sometimes running through it and leaving most of the kids off the line. Yes, otherwise then we are expected to have been visual teachers, kinesthetic teachers, try to use the multi-sensory approach, touching on vision, seeing, touching, smelling, feeling, so that if the child's smelling was weak, then visualizing would have helped. So let's try to use a multi-sensory approach so that whatever it takes, we would have been able to help that child in the specific problem he or she has. And then shall we learn how to also help those who cannot grasp the pencil properly? Can we use mnemonics? Do you remember my very eyes may just see under 9 planets? Do you remember? Does somebody remember this? Yes, that style of learning is what we call mnemonics. M-N-E-M-O-N-I-C-S. And then that is trying to get clues and prompts. And so mine is Mars. Very is Venus. Are you getting it? We are learning the 9 planets. So we try to get things that will stand in for the main concept. And then the moment we make it friendly, the child grabs it. I learned that when I was in secondary school, and that is 1990 and 91, and I'm still saying it. Use mnemonics, and it's there and has remained there. So we can use mnemonics for them. We can also consult the parent. I wonder how a child can be taught holistically, leaving out the parent. I can't imagine. For me, it is never possible. If you have been teaching a child and you thought that child is performing like too well and you didn't consult the parent, I want to advise that if you consulted the parent, that child will perform better than what you think he or she is doing. The reason is that every parent has an idea about who that child is and what he or she feels the child could have done better. Because a parent would have seen the child in another form at home, and then the child will exhibit another trait at school. So if I tell you how my child behaves at home, and that is what I do. At the moment I realize something new, I put it down on paper, and then I write a short note and put it in my child's bag and write the teacher's name. When you go, give it to Madam this. And when you open, it is, I observed that he has done this today. And so I want to say continue. And so we work hand in hand. That's what I do. And so for that, I'm able to get the best for my kids. Yes, you would think they are doing well, but I bet you, if you try to do collaboration with their parents, they will perform extremely abnormally beyond the normal. And you will realize that, so you are not even getting the full capacity in terms of performance of the children for not collaborating with their parents. The parents are the owners of the child. You are the second teacher. The first teacher is the parent. So let's learn to collaborate with the parents of these children, especially who have difficulties, and then we will try to help them. Can we also seek occupational therapy? Yes, can we look for consultancy? For instance, I ran a reading clinic consultancy in Winneba, and then it is a team. She is part of the team. So what we do is the schools are able to say, identify, observe, and then group, let's say 50 children who are just not performing. And then they write officially to our department, like consulting, right? That we should come and conduct standardized assessment on the kids and then give interventional strategies. So when we come, we observe the kids, and then we conduct our assessments, and then we open files for each child. And then in the file would have been interventional strategies. We would begin with the child, and then we would charge you, the school, to continue with the interventional strategies. And then there is a portion in it that we would come and do a follow-up or some evaluation to find out whether what we did is working out or we need to change. So you can also consult occupational therapists or reading clinicians or special needs educators, and they are all around in the country so that we could come along and help you. Then rather explain to the child than asking the child to explain. Try. You remember the father to the boy was trying to explain to the boy that I am sorry for scolding you. I didn't really understand what your problem was. I am sorry. And that, don't worry, you shall get over this. Don't ask the child to tell you why he's not able to learn. He doesn't know. Sometimes we knock, tell me, why can't you read this? Tell me the reason why. Your younger sister is perfect in class. She's always the first. What exactly is your problem? Tell me, where did you get this from? That child has no answer. No, the child has no answer. You should rather be the one giving the child hope that I have realized that this is the problem, but you do not worry, I will help you through. Give the child hope, because hope moves mountains, and then the child would have been able to overcome. Please, you should also try to use styles of voice. A very good teacher has tonations. Are you getting it? There are pitches of our voice. Even parents, sometimes you look sternly at the child and then he or she feels, I've done something wrong. Sometimes you shout and then it's like hell is breaking loose. Something has occurred that is unacceptable. Sometimes you say, the same applies to the classroom. The pitching of the voice will tell the child either there is a problem or not. No. If it is wrong, it should have been no, but no, stupid boy, no. They are two different things. So we will have to learn how to pitch our voice. And then we will also have to ask questions specifically. As I said, don't ask the child, how did it happen? But rather ask the child, what can you do better? And then let me help you through. At this juncture, we will project some case histories of certain children who have problems. And then I'm waiting for you. We will project some case histories of certain children who have problems, and I would urge you to help me figure out what problem is that the child is having. Is it dyslexia? Is it dysgraphia? Is it dyscalculia? Is it auditory processing problem? Is it visual processing problem? So there we go. The first one says, my name is Mrs. Opong. I have a brilliant child. She is among the first 5 in class. She is responsible, diligent, and very respectful. She really listens well to her elders. I am a very proud mother. But just like the saying, not all that glitters is gold. My child is not gold either. She has a problem, a big one that I and her father cannot comprehend. She is a good student, all right, but she is terrible organizing assignments. She will always call home and say, Mom, I can't understand why this is not working out. She complains of every Tom, Dick, and Harry. Her teacher's worries have always been her inability to do calculations. She has good language skills, however. If she is to operationalize that skill, then she is at sea. Almost every day, her money is misplaced. But the strange thing is that if you are to follow her closely and track her usage of the money, then you would realize that her money doesn't get misplaced or missing or stolen. What do you think is the problem of this child and why? You bow down, I come to you. You want to
dyscalculia.
You think the child has a problem with dyscalculia?
Yes.
You have a reason?
Because she can't calculate, inability to calculate, do the calculations.
What about the fact that she can comprehend? I'm not going to confuse you. Yes, it's dyscalculia, but what about the fact that she can comprehend? She's intelligent. Will you applaud that child a little before like breaking her down? Like you have dyscalculia. What are the things she can do well?
She listens.
She listens?
Well, yeah.
What else?
Her good language.
She has good language skills. I heard a male voice somewhere. What else does she do well? Do we have a volunteer?
She listens well to her elders, and she's brilliant.
She's brilliant.
Yeah.
And then you wanted to say something. She can read. So what I want to urge us to do is, when we realize that our kids have problems, please let us first of all look out for what they can do. Don't jump, don't hop onto the disadvantages. That is frustrating, even to you as a parent or a teacher. For all you know, you are calling or you are inviting heart attacks to yourself. Or you are calling high blood pressure to yourself by starting with a disadvantage. Can you say, wow, you are doing well in reading. You are smart. You are intelligent. You always come to school. You obey your elders. But it looks like you don't keep your money well. Have you realized that? How do you keep your money? Have you seen how I was speaking? It is calm. But when you start with a negative, you may end up even hitting the child because you would have been charged to a certain degree that will forget the good things. But please, these fingers are not the same. Every time I'm about to scold my kid, I lift up my hand and I say, these fingers are not the same. This one has its shape and the role it performs. This has. Why am I expecting the child to behave like how I was? Some say when I was schooling I was the best. You should also be the best. That is not fair. That is not fair at all, because that child is also a special image of God and came with his or her own packaging. And you get, everyone came with his or her own packaging. You are just an agent. You are a carrier of that child. It is through you the child came. The purpose for the child is with God. Who that child will become is with God. You are just like a caretaker, right? The child is even not your property. No. But we put our names on them and we say, my son, my child, be doctor, be thus. And for all you know, God has a special purpose for that child. So let us begin to realign our thoughts, looking at the God-given talents that the child came with. And then we try to help them out their weaknesses. That would have been better and encouraging. There are 5, we will just look at 3 and then we are done. So the next one goes like this. Abner, that is your 100th time you are falling over by yourself. There is nothing there. What is causing you fall? Why? Why do you keep falling by yourself when there is nothing there causing you to trip? Then Abner comes in. Sorry, madam. No, don't tell me sorry. Stop tripping. But I can't help it, Abner says. Then, don't stand up. Sit at your chest. Sit in your chest still. till school closes and go home to your parents. They always complain that you have sores all over your body and blame me for being irresponsible, but you are the problem. This is Abna's story. Every day in class, at the cafeteria, everywhere, Abna is falling. Clumsy is an understatement to describe her. When she has to pack something, she either bypasses the object or then she will get another object. It's like her eye see one thing and her hand goes to pick another thing. She can't skip a rope because nobody wants her on her team. And when she tries to skip a rope by herself, her hands don't move together. And before she knows what is happening, she's on the floor, flat on her face. What do you think is Abna's problem? Any volunteer?
Visual processing. Yeah.
Abna has visual processing. So there you are, you became a specialist altogether. Wow. I'll bring people to you for consultation. You see how all of a sudden, then you can tell, oh, this is my child's problem, or this is this child's problem. Then the next thing is, how do I help the child? Yes. So yes, truthfully, Abna has visual processing disability because she's seeing this and is picking the next one. Then we shall look at the last. Kweku Sapong is a student of Achimota International School. He is 13 years old. However, he is in class 6. When he is with his peers, he finds it difficult to contribute in their conversation. His complaint mostly is, before I talk, the conversation is already gone. His friends usually laugh at him. His worst subjects are French and English language. He finds it difficult to remember things, even if he was just taught. What is his problem? Now, let me be fair. A good teacher distributes his questions evenly in the class. What is his problem? Sorry to take you on the spot. Are you listening?
No, ma'am.
I saw you were not listening, so I used that strategy. What is his problem?
I think it's dyslexia.
Dyslexia. Do you agree? I see a head shake. That no. What do you think is his problem?
Auditory processing.
Auditory processing. Hey. We are lucky to have specialists in this room. People are mentioning big terminologies. Auditory processing. What do you think? Shall we have a third view? Dyslexia, auditory processing. What do you think? Hello? What do you think? It's a bit of dyslexia and auditory. So this is a multi-problem. Remember, we said some of the cases are multi-dimensional. So after we have realized that it is multi-dimensional, now let us weigh which one is more than the other. Which one calls for more attention than the other? What do you think? He's 13 years old. 13 years old, what class should he have been? So we begin from there. What class should he have been with all things being equal?
Form 3.
Form 3 or JHS 2. And then he is in class 6. So right away, you should know that this boy has a problem. And then the next thing is, then what is the problem? And then what is the problem is that he finds it difficult to contribute in conversations. In fact, by the time he finishes thinking and wants to say his, the conversation has ended. And you say it's what? More of what? Auditory processing. So I think auditory processing is more, is the priority.